weapons, but it was clear that Soviet superiority in the air being annihilated. No Soviet pilot wanted to be the day statistic. It was one plane a day, but nobody wanted to be that plane. That Gorbachev had no choice but to withdraw his troops. It's certain that one weapon made the difference. That was the end of pushing out the population that had no defense against the air attacks. So the introduction of these weapons made the difference. So as a result, take the next picture. All over Afghanistan, you see this. Downed Soviet aircraft and local villagers sort of squatting on the ruins of the aircraft, whatever can't be taken away as scrap, and sort of posing, we won, we won. Next. Now, Herat. Herat's resistance, like all politics, makes very, very strange bedfellows. Here are two typical mujahideen of the Herat area. These were taken right after the collapse of the communist government. You can see on the right, this is one of Ismail Khan's soldiers, who still has a sort of a military look about him. The old army unit that fought for Ismail Khan. On the left, you have your typical villager mujahid with a nice cartridge pouch, which was given to him and most definitely made for him by his own mother. Okay, take the next. Okay, I'm going to ask Azim now. Can you recognize the ethnic group of this one?
Is he Tajik?
He's living among Tajik, but he is not Tajik. I'll tell you what he is. He's Russian. He is one of many, many Soviet deserters. I was with the UN by then in 1992, and I heard about this guy who was repairing motorcycles in the outback, in the backcountry of Herat. So he asked to see him, and he showed up with a turban and a beard, and we spoke, a little Ruski, a little Russian, a little Persian. He said, I have gone over to these people. I have a wife. I am one of these. I never want to return. Do you want us to send mail to your family? No, I never want to go back. There are quite a few of these, still to this day, living throughout Afghanistan, just Soviet army deserters. So here's one of them. Okay, take the next. Oh dear. You know what that is in the middle?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Okay, take the next one. Okay, take the next one. And this is one of our medical teams, one of our women doctors going into the outback to take care of people during the Soviet occupation. That's how we moved around, with horses and on foot. Next. Okay, this is some of the militia of Ismail Khan, who look exactly like Taliban, but they're not Taliban, overlooking the ruins of Herat right after the fall of the communist government in 1992. So a lot of these pictures are now of 1992. Next. Okay, well, this is a view of Herat as it looked just before the Soviet invasion. Looks like a picture right out of the 15th century, except for the telephone wire over there. You have the fields coming up very close to the old castle and old city walls. All this is 15th century architecture. And I do want you to note that these pine trees, not palm trees, were much too high, served as screens against the desert wind to protect the city. Now watch what happens. Next. Okay, this is the citadel today, or rather taken in 1992. Why? Because the Soviets cut most of the trees to prevent mujahideen from coming close to the city. As a result, in 1992, right after the collapse of the communist government, the city was invaded by dust, just blown in from the desert because of the loss of the tree cover. That's the old 15th century castle. Next. So, okay, you get the feeling. These are the ruins of the great architectural complex of the 15th century that was blown up by British engineers in 1885. Those are the only ruins of it that were left because they were afraid that the Russians would advance on Herat back then. You get your feel of the wind of 120 days in summertime blowing the desert sand right into the city. Next. So here is a view of Herat Oasis as it looked in 1978, just before the Soviet war. So you see all the century minarets and the mountains from which we've descended. And watch the next picture. It's the same cityscape after the Soviet withdrawal. So you can see archaeological disaster, carpet bombing. The city revolted again and again and was simply massacred from the air. And also the vegetation cut to prevent mujahideen from entering the city. Though there's not too much wind on this particular day, but you can see the catastrophe. Next. So this was a view of what most of Herat looked like in 1992. I took the United Nations High Commissioner to see this, and after we traveled for 2 hours through larger Herat Oasis, through just this, he said, Hiroshima. Soviet repression was no joke. Next. This is Herat City Center in 1992 at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in September. It's darkened because of all this dust blowing in from lack of tree coverage. Next. The refugees coming back to Herat after the fall of the communist government, many of them are coming in from Iran, in the ruins. Next. The poverty of it, of course, crushing poverty. Not at all the same feeling of striped coats and people riding horses for fun or laughing in tea houses that you get in 1978. It wasn't all roses then, certainly is not now. Next. Okay, this is the Soviet legacy, the heavy landmine presence everywhere. Refugees cannot return anywhere if you don't have demining. And your humble professor here actually brought in the first United Nations demining team in Afghanistan right in 1989 in areas from which the Soviets had just withdrawn. But they're everywhere. Very, very dangerous. It's extraordinary to say, but I've actually seen just what that represents. That is, with the United Nations team, we were sitting having tea in our sort of gathering place for which we wanted to distribute the food and medicine, and our cook simply walked off into the brush to cut thorns and thorn bushes for fuel, and he stepped on a mine, and that happened to him right in front of us, just blown off. Lots of kids are getting their legs blown off by this, and of course when you travel today in Kabul, Kandahar, Herat, you see lots of people hobbling around on one leg or fitted out with artificial limbs by the Red Cross. It's one of the tragedies of what's happened. Yes?
I read that the Soviets would drop toys or shiny objects and things like toys.
There's an element of propaganda to that. It's what I described to you that was really being used massively. I did see what I was told was the shell of what was supposed to have looked like an alarm clock. That's the only thing I've witnessed. There were enough horrors going on that we didn't need that. When they refer to those toys, they're usually referring to these what they call butterfly mines that were dark green in the pasture zones, or yellowish khaki in the desert zones, or dark green. That's what I said, dark green or yellowish khaki, or white, right, in snow zones. That's really what they're talking about. But booby traps, perhaps. I didn't see them. Saw plenty of other things, but I didn't see that. Okay, sorry.
Right, yeah, another true-false question. There's one account of the war, I don't know if it was Lester Brown or something, that said the Soviets did try to create at least a few green zones inside of Afghanistan, like in the late 80s. Or like places that they would hold and provide basically.
Oh, I see what you mean by a green zone. You mean ecological, but safe.
No, yes. Well, safe zones, but they would also try to supply to some degree.
Yes, after 1985, 1986, Gorbachev tried to shore up the new boss of the country, Najibullah, who started proclaiming, I'm not a communist, this is not a communist revolution, I'm a nationalist, I'm just fighting against Pakistani Chinese.